happiness peaks at making $75,000 a year, or any money you make after that is not going to have a significant impact on how happy you are. Hello everyone, I'm Seth, this is Acquired Salary. In today's video, I'm going to discuss and react to CNBC's piece on why $100,000 salary can't buy the American dream. Before we get into it, if you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. I greatly appreciate if you drop a like on the video and subscribe to this channel. Your support like this helps grow Acquired Salary's reach, allowing me to continue to teach people how to think critically about their situations and provide them with free tools, information, and perspectives we all need to build the lives we want. With that, let's get into it.
More than half of Americans say they would need at least $100,000 a year to be financially comfortable.
The benchmark of a six-figure salary used to be the gold standard income. It represented the tipping point of finally earning a disposable income and building a savings, spending based on your wants, not just your needs.
The American dream is what makes a middle-class lifestyle. You're able to pay your bills. You're able to put food on the table, put a roof over your family's head, and you have some additional savings.
Now, people making well over six figures are still living paycheck to paycheck. What used to symbolize financial freedom is now keeping people stressed about making ends meet.
26% say they would need more. A salary in the range of $100,000 to $149,000 per year would make them feel financially comfortable.
This checks out because last week I reacted to some data about the middle class is defined as $55,000 a year up to $165,000 a year, which is a pretty large range. $110,000, which is a entire salary in itself. But from that standpoint, part of this reason we all need, or 26% of people consider the fact in order to live comfortably they need more money, is the cost of living. The cost of living, specifically the cost of college, the cost of housing, and as it relates to the American dream, the cost of having children and childcare have all dramatically increased. So it's not surprising to see these numbers.
I think unfortunately what has happened is that wages haven't kept up with the cost of living by and large for the last 50 years or so. And so it becomes...
Yeah, even worse than that is wages haven't kept up with the cost of living, nor have they kept up with the amount of productivity increases we've seen since the 70s. In the 70s, we see this massive discrepancy in the amount of productivity employees have, and their pay is not keeping up with that. It's almost twice the amount of productivity increase, yet they're not being compensated commensurate with their productivity, which, again, is a major issue. And I think one of the root causes of this issue is kind of the McKinsey company consulting with CEOs, making it so that back in the 70s, the average CEO earned 21 times the average employee salary. Well, in today's numbers, they're now making over 300 times the average employee salary. So productivity has increased. CEOs are just holding on to all the money and not passing it down to their employees, which is unfortunate and something needs to be done.
It's increasingly hard for many families to be able to attain that sort of middle-class lifestyle, that American dream.
How much you need to feel financially secure varies so much depending on not only your geographical location, but of course your lifestyle. It used to be that a six-figure salary was like the gold standard, but now
yeah, from that standpoint, there was a study back in, 2008, 2010, somewhere around there, and it said the, happiness peaks at making $75,000 a year, or any money you make after that is not going to have a significant impact on how happy you are. Well, from that standpoint, this was, well before we had all this inflation in the most recent years. So it would be very easy to make the claim that adjusting for inflation, it's now easily at $100,000 a year. And again, high cost of living areas is going to make that even higher, pushing you towards that $165,000 middle class salary, as well as, the lifestyle that you live, which we see a lot of lifestyle inflation because of social media and the pressures that people have to make it look like they're ahead of their peers, or so on and so forth.
nowadays that may not be enough to make ends meet in certain parts of the country, especially like New York or San Francisco, where it costs so much more just to cover your daily.
Yeah, from that standpoint, New York and San Francisco, you can be spending $4,000 a month on rent alone. That's $48,000 a year, which is almost the low end of a middle class lifestyle salary, which is just absurd.
Expenses.
Here's why a $100,000 household income no longer buys the American dream. Go Banking Rates analyzed how much a family of 2 adults and 2 children would need in each state to own a home, a car, and a pet, as well as have an additional 20% of their income for savings and 30% for discretionary spending.
The core of what the American dream means is
So just going back to this pie chart here real
Percent of their
quick.
income for savings and 30% for discretionary spending.
This is going to be a little bit on the low end in my personal opinion because, some people are, if you're able to get into a house, you're probably looking at a 50% debt to income ratio, i.e. 50% of your income is just going to your mortgage payment alone. And then 20% on savings, 20% is kind of on the low end. I prefer to kind of follow the guidance provided by the Money Guy show, which is 25% if you want to have, a good retirement. But if you want to have a great retirement, you want to save 50% of your income. And then obviously discretionary spending, that's something that you can play around with and be flexible with. However, you can't save 50% of your income if 50% of your income is going to your home, car, pet, and other expenses that are essential to live daily life. So these numbers that they're about to present right here, they're going to be slightly lower than what I would think is best to save and invest properly and have a healthy retirement eventually.
the core of what the American dream means is some amount of economic security, that you feel like you can get by and do a bit better. Maybe do better than your parents, maybe be able to afford a house, certainly be able to save for your children's future.
All 50 states require more than a $100,000 annual income, with 38 states needing more than $140,000. The most affordable states, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Kentucky, need between $109,000 and $117,000. The median income for a household of 4 people in each of those states in 2022 was between $71,000 and $87,000.
So let's just take a note here. We've got, 109, 116, 117 roughly in the cheapest states, and that's the income required to have 50% going to, household life essentials, 30% discretionary, and 20% savings. Well, if we look at the most expensive states and the median incomes, it's kind of like really sad.
Hawaii, California, and Massachusetts are the most expensive. Each requires an annual income of more than $240,000.
So these required incomes are double that of the least expensive states, but it gets even better. Watch.
The median income for a family of 4 in those 3 states in 2022 fell at least $94,000 short of what's required for the American.
If you look at the median income here, it's 125, 111, and 148. 148 is on the higher side, but all things considered, those salaries in the most expensive states are just slightly above the required income to achieve the American dream in the cheapest states. So obviously, something's not working about our system, and it makes a lot of sense that the vast majority of Americans cannot afford an unexpected $1,000 expense if this is kind of the layout of how our median incomes break down and the required income in order to afford the American dream. It's just so unaffordable at this point.
American dream. A different analysis from EPI found that in about 80% of the country, a family of 4 can afford their basic needs on less than $100,000 per year. Those include things such as housing, food, transportation, healthcare, childcare, taxes, and a few other basic necessities.
It doesn't take into account anything extra. It's really just putting food on the table, putting a roof over your head, getting healthcare for your family. And so you're not saving for a rainy day if something happens.
From that standpoint, having your bare necessities met is meeting Maslow's hierarchy of needs on the most fundamental level, but everyone wants to get up to the higher level of needs and perhaps one day obtain self-actualization.
To somebody, or if they lose their job. So there's no extra in there for retirement, for kids' college. Those are the kinds of things that many people want to save for. Those are the many things that people consider a part of the American dream.
Only about 3% of those counties have a median income higher than the basic cost of living.
The idea behind the American dream hasn't really changed, even though lifestyles have. It used to be that you could get out of school, get a job, buy a home, and start a family, and now those milestones are harder to achieve.
Yeah, from that standpoint, the average first-time home buyer, I think, is cracking into the mid 30s, if I recall correctly, and the average home buyer last year was something like the mid 50s. So obviously, these numbers are getting more. They're raising in age because things have gotten so expensive, and it's just it's not even just a supply and demand issue, but overall, it's multifactorial, and there's all kinds of aspects contributing to why this is such a big problem. And we haven't been doing anything to address the root causes, and they need to be addressed one by one.
That a high school degree, you're good to go. You can get a great job building cars or something and be right in the middle class off of a high school degree. But now, in order to get into the middle class, a high school degree is clearly not enough, right? Now,
Clearly not enough in what regard? Because one of the things that we've seen is credential inflation, and a lot of companies falling to the logical fallacy that is credentialism. Degrees that used to just require a high school diploma are now requiring college degrees, even though the actual day-to-day activities of these jobs has not changed whatsoever. So it becomes very difficult to understand why does this job all of a sudden now require some additional credentials, especially if it's not going to add additional value to the role. It makes no sense, and I've talked about it ad nauseum in some of my other videos that you might be interested in checking out. But before we go on any further, if you're liking what you're hearing, please share this video with a friend or someone that might benefit from its message. Again, because it is word of mouth referrals like this that help to grow Acquired Salaries' reach so that we can make a bigger impact on the world by providing information, tools, and perspectives so we can all live the life that we want.
now you gotta pay for college.
People are graduating with much larger student loan balances, and then it's harder to be on that same sort of career trajectory that would provide the stability that you maybe would have had a generation ago to save up for the down payment on a home.
Student loan debt reached an all-time high of $1.77 trillion in the first quarter of 2023. This can have a ripple effect, especially when entire generations are starting their adulthoods with thousands of dollars in debt.
So when you think about the kinds of investments,
Yeah, from that standpoint, colleges are being plagued with administrative bloat and continuing to raise prices without adding additional value to obtaining that degree. If you check out one of my videos last week, I can't remember which one specifically, but the cost of college when adjusted for inflation from the 70s has doubled to today. So the cost of college has doubled, yet the value provided by these degrees has not doubled because we haven't seen salaries increase or double within that same time. Again, this goes back to the productivity changes. Productivity's gone up, yet the wages has not, at least not at the same rate. So college and student loan debt is one of the biggest problems that the younger generations face. And again, this comes back to we need to make sure that we have the proper incentives. We need to hold schools accountable. If they're not providing, proper value, if college doesn't increase the value of the degree commensurate with the amount of expense that they're increasing, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. They shouldn't get funding. They shouldn't get loans because at this point in time, students want student debt forgiveness. And I think there's there's definitely a justification for students that have paid off their principal loan balance, yet are still paying student loans because of the interest rates. They should have some path to forgiveness and having the rest of their loan wiped out. But students that haven't probably still need to pay. They still need to have some level of accountability. But additionally, we need to put some of the accountability on schools, because if schools are being held accountable, like, hey, your students aren't getting high-paying jobs, even though you're charging out the wazoo, you're no longer going to get funding or whatever it is. We need to do something to incentivize schools to make sure they're providing an equivalent amount of value for what they're charging.
you want to make for your children, the cost of college has gone up a lot faster than overall inflation. So trying to make those investments on a smaller and smaller paycheck compared to the cost of living can be very difficult and almost impossible. And so the kinds of debt that young people can rack up going to college gets larger and larger, and your ability to then make ends meet yourself, be able to buy a car, be able to move out of your parents' house, those things become much more difficult over time.
The American dream typically is people owning property and having children, but that's becoming largely inaccessible for many people. And even those
Again, it's becoming largely inaccessible because the cost of college, that has gone up. The cost of housing and childcare, they've all gone up exponentially so and have far outpaced inflation. From that standpoint, in order to be in a middle class lifestyle, you pretty much need to get a college degree so that you can get a higher paying job. Well, the cost of that's gone up. And then if you want to start a family and have kids, well, you probably want to own a home, and the cost of homes has gone up dramatically. Oh, also, since you have to afford your home that you're raising your kids in, both parents need to be working because we can no longer afford to live in single income households. Well, that means parents are going to have to pay for childcare, which has gone up exponentially. Again, all of these things are increasing in expense while people's wages have not been keeping up. So it's no wonder that the younger generations are not having kids. If you look at it, the West is below replacement rate in terms of population growth, and it's because the younger generations can't afford it.
Those who have attained these things are finding themselves managing every dollar coming in and out just to stay afloat. So that trade-off is underlying the new cost of the American dream.
Millennials and Gen Zers still want to buy homes despite feeling like they can't afford it. 62% of younger millennials and 63% of Gen Zers still say owning a home is part of the American dream. 66% of US renters surveyed say rising prices leave them feeling hopeless about ever owning a home. 72% of respondents say they can't afford the down payment. 17%.
Yeah, in terms of rising prices, if you get a 2% raise and housing prices increase at 2%, it's not like for like because the cost of housing is so much higher than your annual wage that it's just pretty much a runaway train, and it becomes more and more unaffordable as we even see like for like in terms of percentage change in income and increase in cost of homes.
Of all homebuyers said that saving for the down payment was the most difficult task in the buying process, and 52% said student loan debt delayed their ability to save.
Yeah, from that exactly my point from earlier. You can't save for a down payment on a house when you have to service loans for your student debt that are equivalent of some car payment or even in some cases a small mortgage. It's insane.
The typical first-time homebuyer in 2022 had a household income of $95,900. Nationally, a prospective homebuyer would need a nearly $110,000 salary to afford the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payments on a median price home.
And the median income in the United States is something like $60,000 a year. So obviously, just based off of median to median, the vast majority of Americans cannot afford the median home.
But the median household income in the United States in 2022 was a little under 70.
Well, even 75,000 being higher than 60,000 doesn't change the fact that most people can't afford a home. It depends on what data that they're pulling from. Okay, so this is US Census Bureau. I usually pull the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
$75,000.
If you're born into a nice neighborhood in which your parents have lots of wealth and lots of income, your chances of doing well are vastly improved. And part of that's homeownership.
Collectively, Americans owe $1.13 trillion on their credit cards.
Inflation, it's
Consumer debt is the absolute worst thing in terms of becoming financially stable. You need to avoid it at all costs because credit card interest rates are upwards of 20%. As if you were investing properly, even if you're investing properly and you have student debt, or not student debt, but credit card debt, you're still going to be heading in a negative direction because the average S&P 500 index return is going to be 8%, as your average credit card is going to be something like 20+%. So you're essentially heading backwards 12%, depending on how much you have in individual accounts and such. But from that standpoint, avoiding consumer debt at all costs is so important. And you can want to doom spend and be like, well, I'm never going to be able to afford a house anyways. That's the wrong way to approach it. If you're diligent and you work hard, you're going to be able to afford a home. You just have to be disciplined and not buy things you can't afford. So ignore social media, ignore these highlight reels on people's social media accounts because it's just going to create this delusion, and comparison is the thief of joy.
eroding people's purchasing power. It's reducing their ability to save for their future or invest in these long-term goals. So that loss of financial stability can create a sense of powerlessness and insecurity and contribute to feelings of uncertainty and vulnerability. It can really impact people's self-esteem, their resilience, their overall psychological health.
Economists have suggested that debt growth became a substitution for income growth. More than a quarter of Americans said that they are doom spending or spending money despite economic concerns.
There's
Don't do
also
that.
this idea that young adults are feeling more discouraged in their own financial standing. So in that way, they're less inclined to even save for long-term goals and more likely to just live in the moment. It's just sort of that mentality.
Again, Scott Galloway has kind of talked about this. The younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, are the first generations pretty much in history to be projected to have a worse quality of life or lifestyle than their parents. And this is kind of, again, Scott Galloway talks about it in his TED Talk, all kinds of contributing data. But for the most part, it kind of boils down to the older generations not paying it forward and passing it down to their children.
Like, you only live once, I may not buy a home anyway, so let's take that trip or let's go to that event, whether it's a Taylor Swift concert or other, big ticket item.
73% of Gen Zers say the current economy makes it difficult to set up long-term goals.
And it's not just about revenge spending. It's just about wanting to enjoy life and make the most of what you have, even if you can't necessarily buy that home or, you're not starting a family just yet and you really want to, feel good about yourself in the moment.
People
do what you can to simplify your lifestyle and enjoy the little things. From that standpoint, we live in the age of technology, so we all have TVs, we all have smartphones, we all have these things that we can do for leisurely activities and enjoy it without having to go spend a ton of money. And while you save that money and take it to invest it properly, you'll eventually get to be able to live that lifestyle that you want currently. It just takes the discipline and delayed gratification at this point.
are indulging to the extreme. And I think we often buy because we think that it's going to change our life or it's going to give us this emotion that we feel like we're missing. And it's like an endless trail of spending and constantly going to make us feel empty because we're externalizing something that we need to give to ourselves. I think that's a big issue with consumerism and it's running rampant.
Social media has changed the conversation so much because there's just been this abundance of the ability to see these glamorous, glorified lifestyles. It's not only celebrities that are presenting themselves this way, but even your own peers, which makes a lot of people feel like they're just not measuring up. They can't financially compete with what they're seeing online. It has left a lot of people, especially young adults, feeling very discouraged in their own financial standing. Even if they're doing okay, they just may not feel that way when they compare themselves to what they're seeing on social media.
Again, comparison is the thief of joy. Try and avoid it at all costs. If you really struggle with it, delete social media. It's crazy how much of an impact it has on how you feel about your life when you're comparing yourself to other people that are only showing the highlight reel when 99% of the time their life is not like that.
The question is, are you able, given kind of the luck of the birth lottery, are you able to have opportunities that are the same as those of people who may have been born into families that are in better circumstances than your own? The American dream is all about it shouldn't matter. The birth lottery shouldn't matter, right? So it's deeply relative.
Yeah, when he talks about the birth lottery, your zip code plays a significant impact or plays a significant role on the quality of life and your potential, just based off of the other people and the other opportunities presented to you that live in that zip code. So it's something that you can't control for, but you can know about it and decide you're going to do something to change the trajectory of your life. I don't know. What do you think? Please share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And consider checking out some of my other videos, again, all on similar topics on tools, information, and perspectives we need to make sure that we're doing the right things to live the life that we want. Until next time.